So I would always ask people, what does supportive mean to you? Because it means different things to different people. But generally, it means that the person doesn't feel like they're being judged, and it feels like they're being led by somebody that assumes positive intent.
One of the key differentiators between good and great companies is leadership. For most companies, the focus tends to be on financial results, product development, and recently on juggling supply chain crises. That leaves little time to think about leadership, let alone getting involved in professional development. However, as many have learned, the value of having capable leaders at the top and middle level of your organization can be a game changer, and oftentimes a lifesaver. I'm Jane Singer, and thank you for joining me today on A Seat at the Table. Each week, I sit down with industry leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and authors who share their expertise, experience, and insights about succeeding in business and in life. Being a great leader sounds like a lofty concept, but it can be distilled down into a series of simple, actionable skills and tactics that once learned, anyone can apply. That's exactly what April Sabral, founder of RetailU, has done. She's taken everything she's learned during 2 decades of managing diverse retail teams around the world and codified her best tactics in a way that leaders in retail or virtually any other industry can use. Today she'll share what she's learned, what's worked best, and how a $1 million chocolate bar drove her team to achieving sales results beyond their wildest expectations. Before we get started, if you're looking to develop knitwear collections that will be retail superstars, then Spin Expo is the place to go. It's the primary exhibition for yarns and knitwear. The fair is a rich resource featuring well-edited, high-quality collections as well as cutting-edge technical innovation. Not to mention outstanding trend information that cannot be found anywhere else. You can learn more at spinexpo.com. That's www.spinexpo.com. There's also a link in the show notes. And check out our website. You can find all of the previous episodes of A Seat at the Table, the show notes, news about our upcoming workshops, and lots of other useful information. You can find it at seat.fm. That's www.seat.fm. FM because it's a podcast. Now let's sit down with April and find out about that $1 million chocolate bar. I'm so excited to have you on the show, April, because if you look at your book, The Positive Effect, I think it's just a total inspiration for anyone who's leading a team, whether it be in retail or any other industry. There's a lot of leadership gold in that book.
Thanks, Jane. Well, that was the purpose of it. It's interesting because I had one publisher read it and they said to me, oh, it's kind of 2 books in one. It's a book about retail success and then it's a book about motivation and mindset and leadership. And I said, well, it's not, you can't really separate that 2 stories. It's one story. It is the journey of being a leader in retail, but it is so much more than that, like you said, just because I put so much of my personal experiences in it and what I've learned along the way regarding building teams, but also developing myself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you're right. There's like 2 parallel stories within that book. Now, in your book, you talk about what we might call your unique recipe for building or developing people. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I really truly believe that for many years, I couldn't really articulate how I was leading or what I was doing to be successful. But that's many retail leaders actually, because we're just getting up and doing it every day. But when I decided to write this book and put down on paper how I did it, I actually sent out, a ton of emails to people and asked them, what did you get from working with me? Like if you could describe my leadership. And so I took those emails and that's how I crafted ACT, Leading with Awareness, which was my methodology of leading teams. And it really starts with being aware. If you're not self-aware of who you are and what you bring to the table or how you impact and influence others, then you really can't drive and deliver outcomes, but it always comes through an awareness of how you interact with others. And I truly believe that because the more that aware you are and about people, then you'll make a huge difference. And so leading with awareness starts with that self-awareness, but also it breaks down into 3 pillars called accept, create, teach. And accept for me was all about being a supportive leader. And whenever I would travel stores and work with teams, that was one of the top things that leaders would tell me if they were being successful, is that they felt supported by the person that they reported into. And when you break that actually down, it's interesting because I'm a very curious person. So I would always ask people, what does supportive mean to you? Because it means different things to different people. But generally, it means that the person doesn't feel like they're being judged, and it feels like they're being led by somebody that assumes positive intent and is really present in that moment. Again, that goes back to being aware, right? Because if you're not aware
Right.
of the moment, you can't actually demonstrate that with people. So accept being pillar number one. Create, which is the second pillar of ACT, which is all about being responsible. And as a leader, I think thinking and envisioning what you're going after is really important. And so, again, that goes back to being aware of what you're thinking about. Now, more than ever, there's tons of books on mindful leadership, meditation, the power of our thoughts, what we think about comes about. And it's interesting to me because a lot of entrepreneurs get this concept
Right.
because they are envisioning something and building something for the future and trusting, if you say the universe powers, to bring it to them. So they're really conscious about what they're thinking about and they're studying that. In corporations, though, it doesn't really exist. It kind of doesn't get spoken about. What you think about comes about. And so that create pillar is all about that sense of responsibility that you have to yourself and the organization and the teams by actually becoming aware of that. Because what you think about, you will create with everybody else around you. And number three is teach. And that's all about being selfless. I can't tell you how many leaders I've had conversations with where they're frustrated because they said, I've told this person to do something and I go back and they're still not doing it. And I always say, well, if you go in with a mindset of being a teacher and a coach, you'll be less frustrated because your job then is not about you and what you've said. It's actually about the other person and what you're asking of them. And then to do that, you've got to teach and coach them to be good at what you want them to be. And so that takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of listening skills, it takes a lot of learning how to ask the right questions. So that's how I sum up my methodology. And I think if more people would read it and adopt it, they'd be growing their leadership skills because it's not complicated, it's very simple.
I think that's interesting because typically when you do come up through leadership, particularly in a corporate setting, you are expected to be giving direction to people as opposed to being a teacher, being a mentor. Not that obviously, all companies are like that, but in general, that's sort of the assumed way that a leader would behave in that environment. So I think that what you're pointing out is an important and new way of looking at things.
Yeah, and I mean, I made those mistakes early on in my career. You think because you get a title that now you have to have all the answers, but you
Right.
really don't, right? You really don't. You just have to ask lots of great questions and pull out what's inside people. Obviously, you're giving them the information they need, and that comes through, mentoring and training and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your book that you can actually leverage the skills of people on your team. You don't have to be the one who's knowledgeable about everything. You're there to really lead. And if other people have expertise, then let them go with it.
Yeah.
Now, in your book, you shared some interesting tactics that you've used to help your team meet higher goals, as well as encouraging them to be continuous learners. What are some of the things that you've done to mentor your team?
Yeah, I think there's this is a big long list for me because I see myself as mentoring people all the time. But I think number one is sharing knowledge. And that's why I wrote the book and that's
Mm,
why I built RetailU because I have all this knowledge and experience and I think my job is to pass that on to other people. So I do think that if you've had these experiences, you should be doing that if you're a leader. And in the book, I share a lot of stories like the $1 million chocolate bar story, right?
right.
Which was a funny experience, but it is an experience that really resonates with people. And so as a leader, you have to get really good at writing stories and sharing your story.
Can you tell us about that $1 million chocolate bar story?
Sure. So I was in an organization, and we were planning for Black Friday. I think it was Black Friday. It was Black
Mm,
Friday because, those holidays are huge in retail, right? Like this is where you
yes.
deliver all the numbers. And so we were in a team meeting in the office and we were planning out everything. I was with the visual team, I was with the buyers, and we were thinking and envisioning what we were going to deliver. And so we had a plan, we had it on the board, we had our sales number, and in the middle of that meeting, we had a new vice president that had started with the organization, and she was going to be leading our team. So she kind of dropped in. It was her first week on the job. She dropped into the meeting, and she asked us what we were doing, what we were talking about, and she just blatantly said, "Well, no, that's not going to be enough. You got to deliver way more than that." And we were all scratching our heads like, well, we've been here a couple of years. We've been looking at the traffic. We know what product we have. And she said, no, you're going to have to deliver $1 million. And so she left the room. That's just what she said. Now, obviously, as a VP, she probably knew more than we did. She'd been
Right.
given a goal to increase the sales. And so we spent the rest of that meeting talking about who was actually going to go and tell her that she was not right and that she was out to lunch and that we could not deliver this number. And so we strategized about that as opposed to delivering the $1 million. So I walked down to her office, right? I'm the one that, got given the task because I led the retail stores. So I go down to her office and, say, excuse me, can I have a chat? And she's like, yeah, sure. She turns, looks at me and I said, that sales number that you gave us is not realistic. All the reasons why and everything we had
Right.
strategized. And she just looked at me and she said, April, if you don't believe don't believe in it, you won't achieve it. And she just turned
Wow.
back around and I just walked out. I was like, well, that didn't go as planned.
Right.
So, so that night I went home and I said, okay, we've got to do $1 million. What do I need to do? And I really believe in envisioning, and what you think about
Right.
comes, because I've studied the law of cause and effect for years. So I went home and went to the dollar store, bought these big chocolate bars, those ones in the gold paper,
Right.
made $1 million bill on a computer, and then wrapped the chocolate bars. And I bought one for every single person in the office and at the
Wow.
store level on the management teams. So I went in early, put them on the desk, sent them out to my team, and said, "Okay, we're going to make $1 million, and when we do this, we can celebrate by eating these chocolate bars." And basically, it sat there and it looked at us on the desk for the next 6 weeks, right? And
Oh,
nobody talked about it, but we just kept looking at it. And the teams were excited. And so we exceeded that $1 million. And it was a really pivotal lesson for me
wow.
in, how you raise the bar and how you raise those goals for your team. But you can do it in a positive way. It's not a pressure way, because I don't
Mm,
find pressure works.
right.
Um, I think inspiring people to envision what can be achieved is the way to go.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. And you're right. Leading people right through inspiration as opposed to beating up on them generally tends to get better results as well as a happier work environment.
For it to resonate and land with people, I mean, the world we live in today is all driven by storytelling. So I think finding ways to share that knowledge in a unique, interesting way. But that $1 million chocolate bar story, you know how many people actually keep asking me like about that and talking to me about it, because it resonates. But it was a leader that challenged me because of her own experience and knowledge, which was great. So I think sharing knowledge is huge. I think scheduling time, make sure you make time for others. And that goes back to that teach pillar of being selfless. If you want people to grow and develop, you have to schedule that time. And there's so many times I've seen leaders just not present and scheduled that time in their calendars. Being honest and sharing what you think somebody can do better. Many people have problems with managerial courage and actually giving that feedback. And one of the questions I like to ask leaders is, I ask, the manager that they're working with, what's your opportunity? And then I'll ask their boss, what's their opportunity? And if they're not telling me the same thing, that means that they're not being honest and sharing what they actually need to share. And you're doing a disservice to that person when you actually do that. So I think that's important. I think also one of the tactical things I used to do was I would ask my team, what would you do if I wasn't here?
That's a
And
good
they
one.
would, yeah, and then ask them to walk me through their decision process. And at the end of it, then I would have a coaching mentorship moment with them about, okay, let's walk through why you made that decision, because I want to understand the why you're doing something so that I can really help you develop that why. And then I would recap with, great, let's move forwards. Or I might share, well, this is what I would do. What do you think about that? And we'd have a backwards and forwards discussion about it. And then the other, another thing is to provide opportunities for people to have those experiences, stretch people, give them assignments and things like that. And I'm a really huge believer in development plans. Everywhere I've gone into organizational wise, 70% of leaders don't have a real development plan. And that's another reason why I built RetailU, because everywhere I went, I would sit down and I would create development plans with my leaders and teach them how to build development plans. And so I was always asked, every team I had left and worked with, they would always keep calling me after years of working with them and ask me for the tools, like the questionnaire or, structured IDP form or whatever it was. And so that's how RetailU came about, the online learning platform, because I decided, instead of like just emailing people things randomly, I would just put it all into a platform and they could access it themselves. So and in the coaching certification program that we launched, we have a whole section on mentorship and what it means, how to really get mentorship into your organization, because it's really important. Otherwise, we won't fuel future leaders.
I think that's really a good point, because regardless of the culture within your organization, everybody needs to be developing those future leaders.
Yep. And then when you ask people what they want, generally, it's always that I want career growth and I want to develop. And the motivating factor for that is most people go to work to earn a paycheck, right?
Right.
That's why they go to work. They don't show up every day and say, I want to make this company really profitable. But they do if you help them. But they go to work wanting to earn a paycheck and earn more and provide for their families. So they're thinking about, I want to go on a nice vacation next year with my family. So what does that take? That takes career progression. And so that's what they're really looking for, and leaders really need to understand and help them with that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Now, one of the biggest complaints when I ask people where they feel frustrated in their work environment, even those who are in management positions, is that feeling of not being heard. How, as a leader, do you effectively and realistically give people a voice? We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really, really important one. It always has been, but I think today more than ever, just with what we've gone through in the last year. And it goes back to the first pillar of accept for me. But there's two ways of looking at like this. It's behavior driven as a leader, and then tactical things you can do. So behavior driven, I would say it's really helping people feel that these three things, that you care about them, that they trust you, and that you're helping them progress in their career. If your team can answer yes to those three questions 80% of the time, they will feel heard and listened to. What that means, though, as a leader, you need to consider that when you're interacting with people, which is being present, being supportive, asking questions. And I always say, listen to learn. Back in the day when I was a manager at Gap, I remember being trained on active listening skills, right? And being active in my listening. But I think if you take that one step further and you listen to learn, you'll always go into the moment with a learning mindset, and you'll always be open to hearing what somebody's having to say. And so I was having this conversation with my father, actually, when I was traveling last week. And he was like, I'm getting frustrated because I don't feel like I'm listening and people are listening to me. And I said, well, when you're talking, generally, most of the time in a conversation, when the other person's speaking to you, you're already thinking about what you want to respond with and say, right? And he was
True.
like, oh, 100%. He's like, I'm already thinking in my mind three answers to what this person's saying. I said, well, at that point, you're not listening. So instead of doing that, why don't you practice the art of asking another question with the person to find more out about what they're sharing as opposed to you wanting to share. But, in the book, I share that book called Skill with People by Les Giblin. And that to me is a go-to book because in that book, he says that most people are more interested in themselves than anybody else. So if we know this, and again, you become self-aware of it, you can actually pay attention to it. And so so that's kind of the behavioral piece. But tactically, if you want to develop that, I've used an exercise where I ask leaders to go through their day and take I, me, my, and mine out of their communication in emails, in conversations. And people come back to me after 24 hours and they were like, it was so difficult. I wanted to talk about myself all the time. Right. So that's like a tactical activity you can do to kind of consider how much you are listening. And then in an organization, things like employee surveys, pulse surveys are really important. Listening to what they're saying and asking anonymous questions because not everybody's comfortable sharing their feedback. I did that when I was a manager at Gap. I would put, a box in the staff room and put a document in there like anonymous and let people fill it out all the way up to when I was a vice president. I had it actually go through the whole organization on technology. So that's really important. And then skip level conference calls and meetings. I used to do that all the time. I would invite people from like down a level onto a conference call and ask them questions, or I'd have a coffee chat. I'd also create spaces where the managers could come into the office, but with structure, right, in that scenario. So it's not just like event. It has to be in a positive format so that you can get good quality information out of it. But yeah, I think those are a few things that you can do to really help people be heard, and really check yourself when you want to talk. You got to do 20% of the talking in a conversation with somebody. And I learned that through becoming a professional coach.
Right. That's very interesting. Yeah, you're right. I think that oftentimes people do these things not even knowing they're doing them. The focus is really on getting the job done, meeting sales targets, solving an immediate problem. So we often forget about some of these, what you might call softer skills.
Oh yeah, 100%. And if I do think they can be taught. I do think I've taken so many leaders through programs and coached them and developed them over the years that it can be taught. This is because human nature is we are more focused on ourselves. It just is the reality. So if you know that, then you better have plans and tools in place to help leaders actually connect and learn how to listen.
I think that's probably the key, leading particularly this younger generation that's now coming into the workforce, right? I think the expectation is that management will be more of a mentor and not just telling them what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I was traveling stores with a client last week in New York, and I was meeting, people my daughter's age, 22, 23, first time in a management role or a key holder role, and how excited they are and their career, and they share a lot more, I want to say, than when I was that age. There was a bit more of a fear from management when I was that age because of that hierarchy.
Exactly.
Whereas now it's more open because of social media and everything. You can talk to anybody, and so they share a lot more, and it's really important that we actually listen to them.
Yeah, that's really, really true. So tell me a little bit about RetailU.
Yeah, RetailU is an online learning platform for retail managers to deliver leadership skills. So we're focused on-demand, bite-size, all competency-based. So videos are around 4 minutes. You watch a video for 4 minutes. It gives you an activity to do in your work week. And then you complete that activity through a workbook, take a quiz, and then you move on to the next lesson. And it really is focused on soft skills, like you say, Jane. It's like conflict management, top competency that managers need to be able to demonstrate, building a team, how to develop leaders, having career conversations. We've got diversity inclusion. We've got about 25 courses now, over 120 videos. And it was built in the way that it was built because I'm an operations leader, and
Right.
we wanted to make it snack sizable, but like reference tools so that managers can continuously use it, because I believe in continuous learning, not just going through a course and then you do it. And most of the time when I was leading teams, the district manager team would always be creating content or looking for TED Talks and things like that, develop their team. So RetailU gives you all the resources for that level of leaders to actually develop store leaders, assistant managers, key holders, and in a way that's relevant to them, that's not super complicated, and makes it actionable. I think that's the top thing, because when I led David's Tea, I would always take 15 minutes on my sales conference call every week to talk about a competency, for example, drive for results. How can we develop drive for results in our leaders? And then what are the actions we can do? And so that's what RetailU is. It's basically all of my knowledge in developing people over the years into these bite-sized programs. And it's a subscription model, just like LinkedIn Learning, but it's really, really affordable. People keep saying to me, don't you think that's a little bit, it should be priced a bit higher? But I wanted to make it so that every manager could have access to quality leadership development, even if their company wasn't giving it to them, which we want more companies to buy it, and we do have companies buying it now. But that was why we built it, so that there was a great resource out there, because we do believe that retail is an amazing career if you can develop those skills and move up through management.
Right. Wow, I think that sounds outstanding. I mean, that just sounds like the kind of thing that everybody would want to have access to on demand, because these things come up, right, during the course of running any business, and to be able to have that resource right at your fingertips has got to be huge.
Yeah, and I use it. Listen, I was having a conflict management conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I actually went and listened to the videos, because it's my knowledge, right? It's what I know. It's like, okay, I'm going to use an acronym. I'm going to say, when this happens, I need this. And, it's very structured in a very practical way. We've also launched a coaching certification, which is a kind of a train the trainer coaching and presentation skills. We launched that this year because we kept getting asked for it. So it will teach your leaders to be a coach, to have good training and facilitation skills, which we know is important, especially now we're doing a lot of virtual calls and things like that. And we're really excited about RetailU growing and just more people getting access to it.
I think it sounds fabulous. So just one last question, April. Out of everything you've learned over working all over the world, managing very diverse teams, what's the biggest thing that you've learned?
The biggest thing that I've learned, that is such a loaded question, but I'm going to simplify this. So I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that no matter who you are and where you work, people leave people, not organizations.
That's very well said.
People work for people. So that's simply it. So, and this is from years of reading exit interviews. It's always the same thing, no matter what organization I've worked for. The top reason is the manager. The second reason is lack of growth and development, which is actually driven by their manager if that manager can't help them grow. And then the third reason is pay. So it's always people leave people. And so I think people really need to understand that if you're trying to build a culture, if you're trying to drive results and you don't want to lose talent, look at your management, your leadership level, and see how they're behaving in your organization, because they are the ones that shape the culture of that organization.
Wow, that's such an incredible insight. I thank you so much for sharing. I've learned a tremendous amount. I've picked up a few new skills reading your book, and certainly it's just been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you, Jane, and thanks for reading the book. First of all, I really appreciate that, and having me on your show.
Well, I'm going to put the links to where people can connect with you in the show notes. I know a lot of people would want to reach out to you, and I think that you really brought so much to the table. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate it too.
If you enjoyed this episode of A Seat at the Table, join me each week when I sit down with leading executives, entrepreneurs, educators, and authors who share their insights, experiences, and vision for the future of business. And make sure you visit Spin Expo. From trend information to technical innovation, Spin Expo is the primary exhibition for yarns and knitwear. The fair provides well-edited forums featuring high-quality products that are bursting with creativity. To learn more, go to spinexpo.com. That's www.spinexpo.com. You can also find a link in the show notes for this episode. Before you go, if you're looking for a concise view of key shifts, opportunities, and risks in global sourcing, then check out the current situation in sourcing. You'll find a link in the show notes. And don't forget to check out our podcast website, where you can find all of the previous episodes of A Seat at the Table, the show notes, news about our upcoming masterclass series, and lots of other useful information. You can find it at seat.fm. That's www.seat.fm. FM because it's a podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Jane Singer, and I'll see you in the next podcast episode.